Hello to everyone that is joining us today. Welcome to the Reapers Channel podcast, The Hermit's Ocean. So, like I said in the description box, this is going to be more of like a general type of thing just to get introduced to what the podcast is going to be about. And basically, what this is going to be taking place for is philosophical discussions about life today in the modern world and what everyone else's perspective is, how they came to that understanding and things like that. So we can learn to kind of understand what different people have gone through and how that has shaped their experiences, and perhaps also reflect upon our own experiences and how we can change our own perspectives on the way that we look at certain things. So I'm going to be starting off the podcast with a poem that I wrote called Society versus Me. It's something that I wrote a long time ago, and I was decluttering all my portfolios for my art and my poems and my story ideas. So I was really trying to organize my life, which was just step one in the rest of the journey of becoming a more polished and well-rounded person. So I'm going to go for it now. Society versus me. Society fits in as I fit out. I try to find my place, but it's not there. My place is lost, confused, gone. My place is not in society, but with my mind, for my will, and in my reality. Society bends the rules, or perhaps I bend the rules. One way or the other, my way or the highway. No one person matches their expectations. So I keep my own. I follow rules, I improve thoughts, I create character, I explore worlds, I keep my own. Lost souls wander around, sins committed, souls tainted, morals devalued, drugs, sex, violence. The core of the present, the foundation of the future, the destruction of the past. Many children ruined by media, by society, by low expectations. I keep my own. I stay within my reality. I fit outside of society. I am. I am not them. So that's the poem that I wrote, and that was kind of me trying to figure out my life probably at 12 or 13 years old. I'm pretty sure that's when most people feel like they're out of it, or they don't belong, or they don't fit in, and they're kind of confused as to what their future could be. And since childhood, I've always been a very leadership type of person, and meeting with a lot of different peoples because I've been networking recently. I've been meeting with entrepreneurs, real estate investors, all those types of good things, just to get myself out and get comfortable talking to people and gaining their experience and their life lessons to be applied to my own if it helps. But since I've been doing that, I've actually been confirming that most people that have grown up in today's society, or even that have similar mindsets as mine, feel like this, where they kind of feel like they're going against the grain, but they kind of just stay quiet and observe because they're so confused as to whether they're going against the grain is the right thing to do or not, because the rest of society seems to be doing something completely different and living their life. But at the same time, there's something inside you that tells you that's not the right path for you. And so I created something like this to show that society isn't necessarily always right. And like I mentioned in the poem, there's a lot of lost people wandering around, and they think seeking pleasure or just committing short-term gratification of their freedom is what's going to lead them to happiness and what creates happiness. But in fact, it's just devaluing the dignity that they have for themselves subconsciously and even consciously, and in the perspective of society itself. And that's going to also have an effect on how your future turns out in terms of how your children will be, how your children will be growing up, what values they will have. And I also talked a little bit about how certain societal expectations or certain standards that are being pushed in society through either the media or even just in society in general was creating a generation of people who who do not have their own values, who do not have morals that they can abide by because it's not serious enough to have morals anymore. And that is kind of destroying their souls from the inside. And I think that kind of leads to the lack of creativity and fun and wonder that has presented itself in today's world. If you go back and through the previous generations, yeah, they had their own problems to deal with, but that came from being, again, too constricted by society's values. So society set a standard, everyone followed it, but then no one was willing to speak up. Nowadays, society has a standard of more liberalism and freedom and being happy and being who you are. But in the end, all it turns out you're just creating a different set of clones that looks like they're different, but they're really not because everyone still wants to belong. So they still end up succumbing to peer pressure or doing things that they may not have done themselves, but they are doing them because they identify with a certain group of people in society. And they're like, okay, well, our mindset clicks in these 2 or 3 key areas, then maybe the rest of our values are the same as well. And that's how they go lost. And that kind of creates a world where we're still living in clones, but more so in cliches of clones or sets of clones. For example, you could say the hipsters are clones. For example, you could say the TikTok kids nowadays, they're clones, or social media influencers, YouTubers, all those types of people. You could technically say that they're a group of clones, that they may not have their own set of values and they're kind of just following the model of the group that they are a part of. And that kind of leads to people not really playing out their own ideas because their group may shut those ideas down and then they think, oh, well, I think like them and they're saying that this isn't a good idea, so maybe it's not such a good idea, so I won't try it out. But then that leads to a lack of creativity in the world and a lack of different ideas. And if you kind of go through the different inventions of like the previous generations, all the way up even to ancient civilizations, you think, how did these people come up with this idea and then implement it as well? For example, the hanging gardens that were created in the desert by a king for his queen. That desert was so dry and there was no vegetation at all in it. But he ended up somehow planting not only vegetation from exotic countries on it and making it look like the most beautiful structure, but also ended up somehow figuring a way to have flowers grow upside down. And with the limited technology that the ancient civilizations may have had, you would think that they wouldn't be able to think of these things, or because they were going through tough times or something like that, they wouldn't be able to think of these things. But in fact, they were probably more open-minded because they didn't have like an international scale of cloning thought processes going on. So not everyone was thinking, okay, maybe this idea won't work because there's another idea better than this out there. They were, in a way, protected by their isolatedness. And I feel like now that we have all this information and everything, it can feel really overwhelming, which is why a lot of people don't tend to try out things because they think, again, like, I came up with this idea. Probably someone across the world, across time periods, came up with this idea and it's out there. So I won't do anything about it. But we never know if your idea could be more successful, could be more improved upon with today's technology. So it's always better to try than to just kind of accept some assumption that you have made because you aren't confident in your idea enough, or you don't want to step out of your comfort zone and try to make this idea a reality. And I've struggled with this as well. I've had a lot of ideas where I would think that, oh, someone else can do it better. Someone else has the resources. Someone else has the funds to do it, and they can do it better. But as I've grown up, I've realized that waiting on people, number one, is not going to make things happen because most people don't know of these ideas, or if they have it, they're going to have the same thoughts as you, like someone else can do it better. Or even if they can do it better, they may not necessarily be interested in that idea as something that they're passionate about. So you have plenty of chance to actually go through with it. And second, the more you wait and the more you think about your ideas, doesn't necessarily make them go away. It just makes you more confused and more overwhelmed. And when you like even leave an idea just to be like, okay, I'm just going to take a refresher, I'm just going to stop thinking about this, your brain is still kind of thinking about it in the background. And there have been studies to prove this type of stuff, which is how a lot of A+ students and researchers or scientists have been proven to study or come up with unique and significant ideas, is to take a break, because that idea is still kind of formulating in their mind, even though they're doing something completely different, like going for a walk or meeting up with their friends or having a coffee or baking a cake, something. But your brain is so powerful that it's still working on that idea because it hasn't closed up that chapter of that thought process yet. So then when they come back to their project, they are able to come up with the idea that sticks easily as well. So just waiting on an idea or thinking that someone else would be able to do it is not going to help you do it. The number one step, if you want to actually do an idea, you think, okay, this is something that I want to try out and I just want to do it, but I don't know where to start. Honestly, just go to the, like, if it's something like local, right? If it's like a party or like a sponsored party that you want to hold, or a charity event that you want to hold, or even if you want to open a business or anything like that, go to whatever you think is the closest mentorship that you can find in your area. Go to small business entrepreneurship centers, go to innovation centers, find even university professors or college professors to kind of help you figure out where you can start. You don't necessarily have to tell them your idea, but you can tell them the gist. For example, I'm interested in starting a business and also sponsoring a party, but I'm not quite sure about the costs that would take place, how I would gain access to certain buildings, where I would go, and things like that. I would call up the city and I would ask them what's the process of like getting a license, or any type of, are there any types of fundings or resources for sponsored charity parties that are there for like the whole city. I could also talk to party planners in the area and ask them, get like a quote. If they're not willing to give a quote, just talk to them about like party planning in general. Some people may not be willing to open up because, of course, again, it might be their business, but some people might be more than willing to help you out, if especially if it's like a one-time event thing. They might even try to sell their own business, and if you don't want to take their business, that's okay. You don't have to. You can just tell them, I'm just kind of thinking about the idea and I'm going to see how it goes. Yeah, so I'm thinking about opening up a business about a cafe lounge type of setup, which provides an immersive experience based on a specific culture. So I've talked about this in my networking events, and I've told people that I am thinking about doing this in the area that we live in, because there isn't that many opportunities for young adults, like college level, and even like teenagers, like up like from 17 and 18, like that are in their higher grades, to kind of go and chill and have a nice hangout for people to just vibe and chill out in. So, and most of the restaurants that provide the food from the culture that I'm interested in do not do a very good job. And they tend to kind of either spread out their menu so that they have too much going on and their quality goes down, or they have not enough going down and their quality is okay, but their prices are high and their environment is not the most fun to be in. And my goal in life is to kind of create hotspots of like wonder. And if you guys want to do that, you are more than welcome to, because again, two heads are better than one. And the more that people in this world actually start creating things locally and then expanding internationally, it'll actually become a much more fun and creative world to live in. And the children of this generation and the future generation are actually going to see like different types of people, different types of things happening, and they're going to get exposure to different cultures and different ideas, which is good because that helps people understand things, even if they don't necessarily want to follow them or believe in them. It's kind of like that hijab, try hijab for a day type of thing, like where you try it out and see how people in hijab feel and live and look, and you get to kind of understand the thinking behind wearing the headscarf, or you kind of understand what those people go through on a daily life, trying to just represent or take part in their religion. So it's kind of like that. These hotspots of wonder are, I call them wonder pots. That's a term that I coined, so please no one steal it. But yeah, these wonder pots are basically just hotspots of immersive experience in this drab little dreary world that we live in, where people are just kind of getting by. And speaking of getting by in businesses, one of my hardcore opinions of this world, which why I believe is there's a lack of creativity and fun in the world, is that there's too much bureaucratic rules and too much companies being like too structured. Even though they may look like they're fun from the outside, or even in training when you're in the inside, like there's a lot of like fun going on and everything, they may have a strict set of rules that you have to follow and abide by. And for a person like me, which is kind of a more freer person, I don't like to be controlled or have the feeling of being controlled, and especially when I'm not being listened to, which I feel like that's the most complaint that employees have about their managers and superiors, is that they weren't listened to or taken into account for. And that kind of environment sucks for me, even no matter how many fun little benefits they might have, like an indoor gym or playing competitions or anything like that. I'm more about socializing and connecting on a sincere level. And I don't like being controlled, or at the very least, not listened to and felt like I was really part of the company. Right. And I think that these businesses nowadays, even though they may look like they're doing a great job, like social wise, I know that there are a lot of businesses doing some social work and they're supporting environmental initiatives and helping out local communities with donations from their actual sales and profits. Even the employees themselves, they volunteer and everything. But at the same time, the companies are running on basically a con man model. A lot of the times I've bought things from big companies, successful companies, companies that say that their quality is the best and that they're implementing a new technology, right? But then that new technology doesn't work as good as it should, even for like the first prototype model. And it's kind of frustrating when you have these things that you're buying with the intention and the not like the trust in this company that they're going to be giving you a certain product that you expect, and they should be giving you that product because that's what they're advertising. They're not advertising a test product, right? They're advertising a product that works with new technology that works, but then it doesn't work, and then on top of that they have their strict return and exchange policies. A lot of companies aren't even doing returns anymore or refunds anymore. They do exchanges, which is even more worse, because if you are unable to refund an item that you did not want because it doesn't fit the advertising, right? And they're asking you to exchange with something else in the stock. Well, first of all, you've got very limited options because you bought that thing within a certain price range that was allowed for your budget. Second of all, you made a decision, especially for like technology things, you made a decision after thinking through all the aspects of it and then decided on the product that you wanted. So most likely you don't have a product that's something that you would be interested in or willing to exchange for. And a lot of these businesses tend to have like again, like these structures in the company that makes it seem like, oh, the employees are really important or the employees are listened to and cared for. But then when you actually work for that company or even talk to someone who works for them and hear their experiences, you find out that most companies don't really care for the employees. They just care for whatever their business is and getting their work done. So they may pester the employees that help them with that work, but they're not managing very well. They're not leaders in the true sense, and they're not building any sort of sustainable relationship with their employee where the employee also feels empowered. And most employees, because they're working on the ground floor, actually tend to have more better knowledge of how the business should be proceeded or what types of structures or policies should be taking place because they are working on the ground level. So they know certain things don't actually follow through well with employees working at the ground level, or certain structures make it difficult for employees to communicate with their managers and their superiors, or certain policies or processes to actually help with the company's operations makes it difficult to actually make a client happy and give them a quality product that is being advertised. And it's kind of like that confidence man ploy. You build confidence in the business builds confidence in them by saying, oh yeah, we're the best in the business and our previous technologies have all worked, and they have built some sort of technology that did work in the past. But nowadays, because everyone's trying to be cheaper and kind of skimp out on quality, they are having a lot of difficulty keeping up with that demand from customers. So again, it's like that whole debate, like, is it better to be qualitative or quantitative? And personally, I think it's better to be qualitative, because when you provide a quality product, you're going to get more customers in. And even if it's expensive, like, they will buy it because they know it's going to last a long time and it's going to do what it says it does. Yeah, and then but it's not just the blame for businesses either. It's easier to make a capitalist society when the employees or the consumers themselves are thinking from a capitalist point of view as well. They just want a paycheck that they can survive off of, and they don't really care, or they have kind of buried their feelings of being unique and creating a difference in the world and finding their life purpose deep down, until of course that midlife crisis happens, and then everything just bursts open and they could end up going into mental illnesses like depression, or they may have some sort of other emotional thing that they're dealing with, and everything just explodes at one time and they don't know how to deal with it. And it's because they have never focused on dealing with it. And most people aren't focused on improving themselves to become the best version of themselves. They think that they should be accepted as they are. And that's a completely different concept than being the best you, right? And that's weird quote that says, if you can't accept me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. That only applies to people who are like good people, but they're going through tough situations in life. That's more of an application to people who cannot control what they're going through, not to people who can control, but they just don't want to control because they want to be accepted at whatever their worst is and want some sort of excuse to not basically be the best that they can be and step out of their comfort zone and improve themselves and actually make an effort to be what they want to be, or to be the idols or the people that they look up to. And this kind of sort of like quick gratification and just money in, money out type of thinking is what's leading also to this dull world. Because a lot of people are unique, and a lot of people, if they tried to be the best version of themselves, they could actually impact their local communities and the international world in quite a big impact. But it's the fact that most people don't realize, or they're so brainwashed into thinking that they can't, or they just don't want to put in the effort. They're just too lazy to kind of step out of their zone and do something that actually makes a difference, that actually makes them happy. And that prevents us from getting a world full of people that are actually making an impact, rather than just going off to work and trusting that the company or the business that they're working for is taking their part of the effort that's supposed to go back to the community and society, and they're representing the consumer in that way. But it's not as simple as that. I come from a religion that, like, I believe in a religion and I follow it. I follow Islam. So in our Quran, or our holy book, God tells us, like, when you are being judged, you are going to be judged alone. He's not going to be hearing excuses that those people or that group of people said to do it, and so I did it. He's going to be asking you, why didn't you think it through? Why did you go through with it? All of the responsibility lies on you to make your own choices. So whether you make good or bad choices, in the end, you will be judged for those, not people who are peer pressuring you or influencing you, or kind of keeping you in a box where you couldn't escape from, because that doesn't fly there. He's going to take into account your basically, like, what do you say? I can hear the word in my normal traditional language, Urdu, but I can't hear it in the English. Kind of like the limitations that you had, and why you that would kind of put you into a position where you couldn't do anything else but that one choice. But it's still a choice, right? And it just depends on what you find valuable in your life, that you end up creating whatever choice you do. And sometimes it can be a choice between a rock and a hard place. I agree with that. But at the end of the day, if you have belief and faith and trust in your capabilities, and that what you are doing is the right thing by all standards, like morally, ethically, and we'll even throw legally, because most legal documents are based on the premise of moral and ethical laws. And yeah, so if you think that you are doing right, by all means, go ahead. And if you don't think you are doing right, then you know what? Don't go through with it, no matter how difficult it may seem to not go through with it, and pick the other choice. What else? I also wanted to talk about, like, that kind of flows into the thing about world problems and social issues being nothing more than trends. And everyone wants to kind of help out internationally. But again, I think you should break down the helping out to the smallest level as possible first. So again, you have to be stepping out of your comfort zone and doing the things that you are passionate about and the things that you think are going to make a difference. Because again, not every single human being is going to think that rescuing stray cats and dogs is going to make the most difference in the world, but you may think so. And following through with that purpose and stepping out of your comfort zone and trying to be the best version of yourself and kind of following through with that way of helping the world is actually going to make a bigger difference because you are a much more confident and principled person because you have certain values. You can do certain things that you may have been afraid to do before, and you may still be afraid to do them now or get anxiety or nervous whenever that opportunity comes because you're not comfortable with it completely yet, or you aren't used to it because you never tried it out before when you were a kid. So it's a little bit more difficult to deal with emotions as an adult. But if you keep on doing that, you'll end up getting into a mode of becoming very comfortable with doing those things slowly but surely. And sometimes it can be much more quicker when you just kind of throw yourself into the pool with sharks and you'll learn how to swim. That's kind of what happened to me, where I used to be a very shy and introverted person, and I would not talk to anyone unless it was like for a professional reason. Like if we were doing a group project in school or if we had to give a presentation, I would give it confidently. But for presentations, I would kind of be looking across the room, jumping from one person to another person, or looking at the back of the room and jumping from one end of the wall to the other end to kind of make it look like I was having eye contact. And I got really good grades because of that tip and trick. But eventually I do have to end up meeting people eye to eye and conversing with them in a confident and comfortable manner. And when you start using these little tips and tricks to just kind of take the baby steps towards your end goal, you will end up maybe opening a YouTube channel like this, where you are comfortable enough to speak your opinions and listen to other people's opinions and take those as well into account. And like I said, I've been networking more recently. I've been joining up like Zoom events that kind of get you to think about your decisions and your values and be more reflective. And I'm just honing my strengths and stepping out of my comfort zone using those strengths. So I can, as a child, I was very confident in myself. So, and even now I am. But sometimes people can judge you, and they will judge you because it's just a survival mechanism to see whether you kind of fit into their community or your vibe and their vibe matches or not. Because obviously you don't want to be friends with or be talking to someone who you don't feel comfortable with, right? And so they're going to judge you, but it's not judging from a negative perspective. It's more of like a survival and a community type of perspective. They're just trying to find their community as equally as you are. And so not everyone's going to think the same as you. So in that sense, their judgment then doesn't really amount to anything in the way that you react to them. So rather than just like hopping on the latest trend, like I know the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement were pretty strong before the lockdown happened, and then the vaccination movement was pretty strong during lockdown and a little bit after. And now we're seeing all these movements coming back slowly as lockdown is opening. And I think it's good to be interested in social issues and world problems, but it isn't always necessarily productive to just be in support of them. You actually have to go out and do something. And if you're actually trying to solve the world problems or you actually care about those social issues, then you have to do something on your side to kind of take part in that movement. You can't just post a caption on Instagram or attend a single protest and think that you've made a difference. That's not making a difference. That's going to a party or, again, putting on a mask to kind of make yourself feel comfortable and make yourself feel like you fit in with the community. Making a difference is going out and learning about the people that are going through with that social issue. It's about maybe volunteering for those organizations that are trying to spread awareness of those issues. It's about holding maybe a protest at your own locale, in your own city, your community, your town, maybe presenting a seminar or a lecture in your local community about the history of those social issues and what we in the modern world can do to help. So little tiny things like this, whatever you feel comfortable with, even if you just share a video that you found on the internet that you think is okay, this is telling the truth, or this is something that people should know, and you share it with your friends, even that is helping out the cause, because it still kind of spreads awareness. It may not be helping out the cause directly, because you may not be changing laws, or you may not be letting people know directly how they can kind of improve the situation or what they can do in their communities and cities, or even within themselves, like how they can reflect upon their own behavior and change that. But it'll at least still create some sort of awareness with your friend group and family group and people you know. And maybe they would end up doing something if they're more extroverted and they're more comfortable stepping out into the world and doing something a little bit more proactive to kind of help those social issues. And then maybe they might even ask you to come by and give a speech, or maybe to come and volunteer for whatever active thing they are setting up or doing. And that's your contribution. So getting involved actually means getting your hands dirty. It doesn't mean just preaching about it. And it's better to start off individually to kind of focus on yourself and improve yourself, because when you improve yourself, there will come a point in time where you will have to step out of your comfort zone and start interacting with others. And that is going to actually be improving yourself, because you're going to have the goal of approaching others with the fact that you're trying to step out of your comfort zone and become the best version of yourself. But then because you're meeting with people outside and you're going to organizational events or even volunteering or anything like that, you're stepping outside of your little bubble. You are going to create an impact in some way or the other. And that's actually going to be a local or community-based impact. And when you've created that impact, you'll be more comfortable in actually trying to be proactive in the community and helping out local issues. And when you start having confidence in those local issues, you may be able to expand those local organizations beyond on an international scale and kind of be able to help out other people in the world that are dealing with those same issues. You could maybe use up any saved up travel money to go and help someone who is having the same issue, but they aren't really improving, and you've seen that your own community has improved using the suggestions that you suggested, maybe, or even by doing whatever you're doing in your local community, it could possibly help someone else in the world that may be set up in a similar manner to your community, or maybe going through the same problem and facing the same issues whenever they try to solve it. So you could possibly go and help those people out. You have to build up from something small and comfortable, an inch, and expand your bubble rather than kind of popping it and then just kind of wandering around in the darkness. And that wandering around in the darkness is actually going to kind of make you rebound and build an even smaller bubble, basically, to the point that you won't have any space to actually breathe eventually if you keep on doing that. And if you want to think of it like as a metaphor, it would basically be, or an analogy, it would basically be, you have a normal sized bubble, you can walk around in it with at least like 2 feet of space each way. You can breathe nicely in it, you can sit down, you can lay and sleep or whatever. But if you step out slowly and you just put one extra breath of air in that bubble, right? Just that one small little tiny effort to become better and more well-rounded and more open to being a person that has their own values, their own idea of who they want to be and what types of values they hold dear to them and what types of things they want to actually do and make, how they want to make a difference in during their life, not even in the world, but just during their life. You will be pushing the bubble just a little bit, and the bubble will get used to that type of pressure, and then you can put another breath in later on. So you take that small step forward, you'll eventually get used to doing that action, and then you're going to start thinking, okay, well, what's the next action that I can do to kind of make even more difference in myself and be able to accomplish this goal that I want to do, right? And slowly, your bubble will become like this 30 feet in all directions. You can run around in it, you can play, other people can come within it. You'll be more comfortable doing more and more things. And that's actually going to make you more happier because you're going to have all this space to kind of play around in and have confidence to do so. But on the other hand, if you are like, okay, I have this 2 feet by 2 feet in all ways space, right? But I want to get over there where there's, say, for example, my goal is 30 feet away, right? But I'm stuck in this 2 by 2 bubble. And I'm like, okay, I want to go to that 30 feet thing. Okay, what's the one thing that I can do that can bring me to that thing? And then you, for example, do like the biggest thing that makes you the most uncomfortable, but you have to do it to get to that 30 feet position. You popped your bubble. You're now not protected. You don't feel comfortable. You are in basically in like the outer realm because you can see all these other people in their bubbles, but you don't feel protected because you have no bubble to protect you. And you don't feel safe because you don't know where your boundaries end or start because there are none. And you're kind of just wanting to make it to the 30 feet. But before you can even make it there, your heart rate is going up. You're going to have trouble breathing. And then you may end up collapsing before you even end up getting to the 30 feet. Or even if you do end up getting to the 30 feet, you're kind of in this vulnerable position. And once you get there, you realize, okay, well, now what? So then you build another bubble for you that's a little bit smaller so that you can feel comfy and cozy. And as you keep on doing that, eventually that bubble will basically be like just the outline of your body. And that's not a comfortable position to be in. That is basically isolating yourself from everyone else, and you yourself don't even feel comfortable in your own space and in your own mind and your own emotions anymore. So that's not how we want to kind of expand ourselves, because that's not going to work. That's going to push us inwards to the limit that, to the point that we can't even feel comfortable in our own skin, because we're going to feel like even if the bubble's there, it's not there. We are going to feel judged and overwhelmed and unprotected, and our own emotions and our own safe space is going to become like our own personal living hell, because we're going to start thinking about all these things and we can't breathe in our own safe space and all that stuff. So it's better to do it with little baby steps to kind of push just a little bit beyond your comfort zone. And eventually you'll get to that 30 feet position without even realizing how you got there. And I think I have some things written down here, but I don't know if I want to talk about those today or not. I will mention that I was watching I was going back to like the 80s music because I'm like really interested in that type of era and their kind of way of thinking of being like a rebel for a good cause and like for their own purpose. And I was watching Jesse's Girl and listening to the lyrics. They're not healthy lyrics at all by any means. But watching the video and watching Rick Springfield's just general reaction and acting in that video was just very amusing to watch, and he's a really good actor, mashallah. But I was watching it, and then I kind of went on to an interview where he was talking about how he's dealt with depression his entire life. And at 17, he actually tried to kill himself, but he didn't end up it didn't end up happening because the rope ended up snapping. Shukr alhamdulillah, right? Thank God. And he was crying as he was telling the interview, and I felt I felt sympathetic and empathetic for him at the same time. I felt bad for him, but also I kind of understood his position as well a little bit, in the sense that he was talking about how he knows that he could do it at any time, and those thoughts keep on coming up. And when someone in the industry that he knows had these types of things and that they were dealing with, and then they ended up committing suicide, he thinks that he's still in that boat of it could tip over any day, even though he has all this success and supporting family and friends and fans. But that doesn't necessarily mean that your emotions are going to be at their ultimate level. And that's for all humans in general. No one's going to have super happy days every single day. And we all know this. Everyone has their ups and downs. And it's because we all have specific values. And I have two kind of things to say about depression. One is that there are some people like Rick Springfield or many other artistics and creative people that feel emotions on a more extreme spectrum because of the way they're set up, because of the way they think. Most artistic people and creative people tend to think more deeply and philosophically, and they kind of tend to observe and then reflect on those things. So it's almost like they're finely tuned to the things around them in their environment and how that makes them feel. That makes them finely tuned to their own emotions and sometimes even other people's emotions. So I think that finely tuning actually creates a bit of a problem for us. And it's because we feel emotions in highs and lows and not necessarily in a balanced way. So if we feel happy, we end up feeling really happy, and we do partying, we meet up with friends, we're stepping out of our comfort zone and feeling comfortable and taking big steps forward, big steps out of the comfort zone. And we're just going out and being all happy dappy fun days and everything like that. But then when we get sad, we get really sad and we start overthinking and being overwhelmed by every little thing in life and feeling frustrated at the smallest mistake that we make, someone else makes, doesn't matter. And that kind of sends us into what the clinical term would be depression, right? It makes us think that, oh, life's not worth living, but we still have to go on living, and you're kind of hiding your emotions, but they're still there and you still have to deal with them somehow, but you don't understand why they're there because you may not necessarily understand that you pick up on emotions and you feel emotions more stronger than the average human being does. And that kind of plays into why in today's modern society, how older generations will talk about how we didn't have allergies back when we were kids. We didn't have depression when we were kids. We didn't have mental health illnesses or safe spaces or anything like this. And I think that's kind of one extreme way to live. But because they didn't have that, a lot of people didn't feel comfortable stepping out and being themselves. But nowadays, we've kind of raised kids to be very reflective about themselves and how their actions kind of make others feel. And then on top of that, it's also how others' actions make them feel. And we've kind of raised kids to kind of think about their emotions in a more focused perspective than we would have, say, when like in the 80s or like the 50s or whatever, like back then. And because of that hypersensitized like culture, right? We've actually created kids that are more finely tuned to emotions, and that actually shows why more people are having physical allergies, or mental health illnesses are on the rise, or depression is on the rise. And all these things, yes, some of it could be genetic. For example, like mental health illnesses, most of them are genetic, but things that even the average human being could go through, like depression and things like that, those things happen usually to people who are too emotionally sensitized. And you kind of have to learn how to balance your emotions with your reasoning and your logic. You have to sometimes detach yourself from certain things that should not be having an impact on you emotionally, but they are because you've been raised to think that way. And the second thing I want to talk about depression is that, from my perspective, from what I've seen, like I said, like I'm a person that doesn't like to be controlled, or at the very least, I want to feel like I'm being listened to. Because if I'm not being listened to, then I feel like I'm isolated, and like there's no purpose for my existence if I'm not being listened to in a productive or a constructive way, right? And that kind of leads me to how I think of depression. And I've seen it in people that haven't gotten tested in my family, but they definitely show signs of depression. And the doctors have, one of my family members' doctors, one of our family doctors have actually said that you're going through depression to a couple of family members. And why they are going through depression all of a sudden, it's, from my perspective, I think it's because something in your life is not being solved. And I know this sounds like a weird theory, but hear me out. When you're frustrated with something that's going wrong in your life, right? And you're not able to solve it, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, your brain's still thinking about how to solve it. And your brain's still in that mindset of, this problem hasn't been solved. And no matter how many times you glaze over it and kind of reason through it, like, oh, okay, well, never mind, it'll get solved eventually, right? Your brain's still in that mode of, it's not solved, it's not solved, it's not solved. And that kind of impacts you in a longer term. Because if something isn't solved and it's an important thing, right, to you, that's why it's going on in the background. That's why you thought about how to solve it in the first place. It's actually subconsciously making you feel tired because you're constantly thinking of how to solve this idea and it's not being solved. And every single time it comes up consciously, you just try to solve it, fails at the solution, and then you get stuck in that rhythm again. And that frustration kind of leads into a long-term stress. And when you have long-term stress, you're not going to be able to sleep properly. You're not going to feel like you want to eat because your appetite's shot because you're not sleeping properly. Your organs are not going to be functioning in a healthy manner because, again, lack of sleep and high stress levels leads to those types of things popping up in your body because your body's trying to fight off and repair and maintain itself all at the same time, which it can't do if one engine isn't working properly. And then your brain is still constantly thinking about how to solve that problem. And when you have multiple problems like that, because no human being ever has one serious problem, we have at least 2 or 3 major problems, and then 3 or 4 minor problems that we deal with on a daily routine. And then we have like maybe 2 or 3 problems that we deal with throughout the day, and they get solved throughout the day. But this long-term stress kind of leads to this feeling of being stuck and not moving forward. And that feeling of being stuck and not moving forward is what causes the depression, from my perspective. It kind of makes you feel like what's the point of life, and why am I even doing all this stuff if the end result is going to be the same? I'm not being able to accomplish my goals. And yeah, I have a great supporting family and I'm successful in my career, but is it really what I want? Is it really what my true purpose is? Is it really what makes me feel happy living? So there's two sides, two factors that I always think about. It's either you're like a highly sensitized person and you're more finely tuned to emotions, so you pick up on them and get impacted by other people's emotions much more. But also, when your own emotions happen, you react to them much on a more extreme level than other human beings do. And number two is that frustration with an unsolved problem can manifest itself in a long-term stress that's happening in the subconscious, and that can lead to your emotional stress arising and creating depression. So I'm going to end the podcast for today, and we are going to meet on Mondays from 6 to 7 p.m. And yeah, so I will try to have different types of topics on each podcast, depending on the theme of the week. And today was just a podcast to kind of talk about some general things in life that I've reflected upon. And I will try to recite a poem based on the theme of the podcast for that week before the podcast starts each week. And eventually, I want to get into actually having philosophical discussions with my subscribers, with you guys. And if you know of anyone that you would like to see on the channel talking about these types of topics, you could suggest a topic. You could suggest people who we should be inviting onto the podcast to kind of understand their perspective and their outlook on life. And most of the time, I'm going to have provocative topics that you may not necessarily be comfortable with. And if I have a topic like that, I will let you know in the description what it will be talking about. But again, these podcasts are kind of free flow, and I don't want to make them feel too structured other than just the outline and the topic and the theme. And I kind of want to let the conversation flow like how we have casual and normal conversations in normal life, because that's how we're actually going to see the perspective of people, and that's how we're actually going to understand where they're coming from when they share their stories, when they actually are comfortable talking about their experiences and their views. So yeah, so I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and go check out some of my other videos on the tarot readings. I would like to apologize to anyone who was looking forward to a tarot reading on Saturday. I was actually away for the weekend and I could not gain access to Wi-Fi during that time. So that is why I did not have anything uploaded. I will try to upload one this week on Saturday, and I should be able to. So just look forward to that and check out my other videos if we have any new people joining today. And thank you. Have a lovely and blessed week, and always be in a reflective and open, curious mindset.